Greetings and welcome to this mini episode of the Airport Communities Podcast. My name is J.C. Harris and I am your host for today. You know how our tagline is everything you think you know about airports is wrong? Well, that wasn't my idea. I know you think it was my idea, but it wasn't my idea. My thing was that although everybody's always looking up there, airport law is essentially land-based. But that isn't really a slogan, is it? And Steve, worked at the FAA all those years, and he was always going on about everything people think they know about air traffic control is just wrong. And so, that was his idea. But airport mitigation, which is what people are talking about with the SAMP, has always been about land. And that's why on things like NEPA and SEPA, the people in the room, Part 150 and so on, are city managers and community development directors, land use planners, people involved with zoning. It's irresistible to keep looking up there for solutions rather than down here on Earth, but that's the essential distraction. We talk a lot about the Sea-Tac Communities Plan, which was debuted in 1976, which may as well be 1776 for all people know or care at the moment. But the Sea-Tac Communities Plan, to greatly oversimplify, was the mitigation for the second runway. But it was supposed to be a lot more. It was supposed to be, how do we live together? And it's such a massive topic. We're going to do several episodes on it. We thought we would start with this, call it a love letter to the three city managers involved in the ILA appealing the SAMP. Any useful mitigations that come out of this stuff will be up to them and the attorneys we hire. No pressure. So think of this as, a love letter that you get to look over the shoulder. People who visit our website are often confused by our main image, which is not typical. Where are all the unhappy people complaining about aircraft noise? The image looks a lot like a comp plan because that is what it is. The Sea-Tac Communities Plan of 1976, co-signed by the Port of Seattle and King County. The STCP was signed 6 years after the opening of the second runway. That was the moment we stopped being a place where people spent Sundays plane spotting on an open observation deck and became what we are now, a true international gateway and the economic engine of King County. It is difficult to overstate the optimism of this era. Call it the move fast and break things technology. Except for a handful of complainers, residents and electeds were overwhelmingly excited about the potential for growth and prosperity. Many of the developments of the era were Boeing neighborhoods, solid middle-class housing for a booming aviation industry. Adding the largest parking lot in North America next to the terminal did not feel ominous. It felt like opportunity. But residents got a wake-up call when exactly what airport planners predicted would happen did happen. The response to the dramatic increase in negative impacts was over 300 lawsuits. The solution was a small group of residents, the port, the FAA, King County, and researchers all sitting down at a table for 3 years to create what was framed as a land use plan. Since the majority of the area was governed by King County, planners could see the entire area through one long-term lens: air quality, water, traffic, crime, zoning, parks, trees, housing, economics, and yes, noise. Since then, many people have tried to rebrand the area as the Highline Communities, but the original name expressed the reality of what we were then and what we are now: Sea-Tac Airport Communities. The bargain of the STCP, in fact, the Port of Seattle's slogan to sell the plan, was simple. As we do better, you'll do better. One core idea, not the only one, but the one people can still see, was a buffer zone funded almost entirely through federal legislation promoted by our very powerful delegation of the era. Most major airports are sited as far from residents as possible. In contrast, Sea-Tac sits in the middle of an area that was already growing, and on top of the watershed for the surrounding area. The buffer was meant both to hold a line and provide guidance on how to ensure thriving communities over the long term. The only recognizable components of the STCP today are the Des Moines Creek Business Park, North Sea-Tac Park, and NERA. But they were meant to be one unified plan, not ad hoc initiatives. To succeed, any agreement of this type would require discipline and long-term management. The committee approach, which had been successful in drafting the agreement, turned out to be completely unsuited for its long-term management. Both residents and electeds began picking it to pieces almost immediately. Within a few years, frustrated members found themselves unable to recruit even their replacements. Later, the Growth Management Act encouraged the creation of the small cities we now have. We chose local control just as airport capacity was about to explode once again. The absence of any organizing principle in airport community planning made a third runway, and now the SAMP NTP, inevitable. Without decisive action, it will make the next phase of long-term projects even more painful. The absence of any shared agreement has led to exactly the chaos the STCP was designed to address. START, the Highline Forum, Part 150, these are all abstractions, with purposes we struggle to define, and which now only benefit the port, their tenants, and for the most part, people who live nowhere near the DNL 65. We believe that what everyone is complaining about today is not the SAMP per se. It is having no say in regional planning. The only actor with any leverage is the one with a weak say in land use, the city of Sea-Tac. The fix is to acknowledge the wisdom of a much broader shared agreement. You already think more productively in miniature with shared agreements like the basin plans for Miller and Des Moines Creek, both of which are recognized in the SAMP Area of Potential Effect, the APE. In both cases, your cities recognize the need for cooperative expert management outside the usual incentives of local politics and in cooperation with the Port of Seattle. Ironically, the city of Normandy Park was at least half the energy behind developing those ongoing water quality improvements, and yet they exited the SAMP appeal process early, even though damage to Miller Creek was the impetus for over $110 million in improvements for all our water systems. The Sea-Tac Communities Plan was far from perfect. It had something for everyone to hate. It unwisely depended upon community volunteers rather than professional managers in order to achieve its long-term goals, and that made it easy to become a very expensive one and done. But it got the one thing right that everything else depends on. Airports are about land. The goal should be to redraw a new agreement, one that contains all the same items of shared interest as 1976. To get there, you will first need to think more like airport planners and then convince electeds at every level to give you the tools to develop that ongoing shared airport expertise, leaving best practice management to professionals. Currently, there is a lot of talk about mitigation for cumulative impacts, but that is impossible to achieve without an agreed-upon baseline and agreed-upon goals. We think the following are useful comparisons. The cost of the second runway was roughly $175 million all in. The various mitigations you can still see, Those property buyouts translate to about 170. The final cost of the third runway was $1.1 billion, while the primary mitigations, sound insulation for homes, construction money for Highline schools, and those water quality improvements, $500 million. The SAMP is currently budgeted at over $5.5 billion, by far the largest set of capital projects in airport history. What we find interesting is that to date, the only mitigations we can see are a $6.6 million settlement with Highline Water District over PFAS, $40 million in planned traffic intersection improvements, the ongoing Sea-Tac ILA of $1.4 million annually, $5 million for a sound insulation repair replacement pilot program that has only fixed 3 homes, and $14 million in ongoing community grants, most of which do not benefit Sea-Tac airport communities in any way. That represents less than 1% of capital projects. Just as bad from our point of view, there is no organizing principle. They are all completely ad hoc. Despite several wars, recessions, and even a pandemic, the Port of Seattle is in its strongest financial position in decades. Can any of your cities say the same? The promise of the Sea-Tac Communities Plan was, as we do better, you'll do better. Property buyouts were meant to build your tax bases. Port packages were meant to strengthen middle-class housing stock. Basin plans were meant to be a starting point for improving salmon recovery, habitat, and public health. Those results should be audited. Did they achieve their goals? If not, a new set of questions need to be asked. What measurables do we need to create in order to fulfill that promise? What do your cities need today? Regardless of NEPA and SEPA, the difference between capital projects and provided mitigations should be the beginning of any discussion concerning equity. But without an organizing principle, leveraging the systems cities already have in place, without measurable goals, why should the port, the state, or the federal government do anything more than continue these insufficient ad hoc approaches? Because the Sea-Tac Communities Plan was so massive, and 50 years ago may as well be 500, ST and I will be doing a series of articles to walk through each component. We invite you to follow along, not as a laundry list. Consider a practical framework to ensure that the most affected communities can finally develop a successful strategy for measuring and then achieving the original and agreed upon community goals for ongoing airport expansion. As we do better, you'll do better.